And we're back. SwamiLee's Sports Talk. I'm SwamiLee.
I am Mellow Mike.
And we have a topic on football today, which Mike has not told me about in advance. So, Mike, what do you got for me today?
Well, our topic is inspired by a recent development in a sport that you and I don't discuss.
Okay.
Sixers superstar Joel Embiid suffered a deep bone bruise in his leg recently,
I
and
saw
he's
that.
going to miss 2 to 3 weeks.
Ouch.
Ouch, indeed. But we're not going to talk about hoops beyond that.
Good.
Instead, we're going to talk about how a couple of injuries in recent years have affected our favorite teams.
Okay.
So, I don't know if you remember the Eagles' most recent playoff game, 2019 wild card round against the Seahawks. 9 minutes in, Carson Wentz goes out, taking a cheap shot to the head from Jadeveon Clowney, and then his backup, Josh McCown, suffers a torn hamstring in the second quarter but continues to play.
Ouch. That just hurts hearing about it.
The Eagles lost that game 17-9. There's a bit of trivia about that I'll share with you later. So the question is, if Wentz had been able to play in the game, or if McCown had stayed healthy, did the Eagles win that instead of losing by 8?
You see, that's easy to say. And if you're playing a board game, a baseball board game or computer game, the real life element doesn't come into play. Sure, Carson Wentz-led team should put up more than 9 points against anybody. I don't disagree with that. But say Wentz stays healthy. Say it's 17-16 in the fourth quarter. Don't you think the Seahawks play the game differently than with a 17-9 lead and a backup quarterback who's injured playing? So my answer really is, who knows? And you can't even say that, because once that player gets hurt, 9 other things could have happened. Okay, Wentz could have thrown an interception that would have led to a pick six, and it's all of a sudden it's 24-9. But yes, in a computer game, I would probably say you'd have to have Wentz there, and you probably win that game based on the fact that it was 17-9. But in real life, just too many other things could happen.
Well, I would say that if either of them had stayed healthy, it would not have changed the outcome, and I'll tell you why.
Tell me why.
It's really pretty simple. Part of it goes to the trivia point that I mentioned a moment ago. The 2019 Eagles are the only team in NFL history to lose 2 games to the same team in the same season by the exact same score. They played in the regular season, and the Eagles lost with a completely healthy Wentz, 17-9. And you might say, well, that was a road game as opposed to a home game for the Eagles, or that was before Wentz really hit his stride. But I would respond, Wentz couldn't get it done earlier in the season, and there wasn't much reason to think that was going to change. And even if he got it done, the fact is there were so many other things going on, as you mentioned, and I watched that game from start to finish, and at no point did it look like the defense was ever going to be able to do enough, whether because of Jim Schwartz's bad play calling and bad play design, or because the players weren't good enough, or because they weren't executing. So the defense was going to prevent them from winning, even if Wentz or McCown stayed healthy.
And that makes perfect sense, because, again, Eagles tie it up in the third quarter. For the sake of argument, say it's 17-17. It's a whole nother ball game. The Seahawks will play the game completely different, and they'll probably shine because the Seahawks were a better team than the Eagles in 2019, I should say. That's just a fact of life. It doesn't mean they can't. The better team does not always win.
Well, of course.
In that case, I would have gone with the Seahawks, no doubt about it.
Me too. Now, let's go to the Steelers for a moment. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, perhaps, and see what your take on it is.
Okay.
You may remember that the Steelers drafted a big kid out of a small Ohio college in the 2004 draft. Guy by the name of Roethlisberger.
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I don't know much about him.
Well, in 2004, the Steelers' starting quarterback at the beginning of the season was one Tommy Maddox.
Yes, he was.
You may remember that week 2 he went down.
Yes, he did.
And Ben, who was clearly unready to be an NFL starter at that point, took over the starting job. The team reeled off a bunch of wins.
A bunch. I think they went 14-0 or something, or 13-1.
Something like that.
Yeah, he won almost every game. I know that.
But of course, he was carried by running game and defense.
It didn't hurt, believe me. But again, you can't just put anyone out there with a good defense unless his name is Trent Dilfer in the Super Bowl. But other than that.
But here's the question.
Here's the question. Okay.
You may recall that in the AFC Championship game that year, Roethlisberger looked very much like a confused, unprepared, overmatched rookie against the Patriots defense.
Yep.
And from what I remember of the game, and from what I've read about more recently, as in within the past couple of hours, I'd say that you can make a pretty strong argument that a tried veteran like Tommy Maddox would not have been picked apart the way Ben was, and that would have helped those Steelers win that game. What say you?
Absolutely friggin' no. First of all, Tommy Maddox wasn't any good. So it's not like you were going to put in a star quarterback. He was a mediocre quarterback on a good day. Okay? If you throw Tommy Maddox in there, he probably gets beaten up just as bad. Okay? Yeah, Roethlisberger played poorly. You've heard the expression on any given Sunday. Okay? You could have put Kyle Bowler in there. You even know who Kyle Bowler was?
Well, yeah, he was the Ravens starter before Joe Flacco.
Okay, you're correct. You could have put Kyle Bowler in there, and he might have had the game of his life or the worst game. Look at Trent Dilfer winning the Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer is not a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but
except that he has that ring on his finger.
Even Trent Dilfer admits that he is not a quarterback of that caliber. But right place, right time, having a good game, manage the game. Let your defense, let your offense, your running game, etc., your special teams all play well. Of course, anything could have happened. I mean, again, they could have brought in T. Martin, and he might have had the game of his life. But realistically speaking, I don't think that would have made a difference. I don't think adding a Tommy Maddox would have made a difference at all.
Okay, one more. We're still back in 2004. You may remember that the Eagles were 13-1 after 14 games.
And they rested all their starters for 2 games. I remember that clearly.
And in Game 14, in other words, their 13th win, Terrell Owens suffered a very serious leg injury, a fracture with some ligament damage, and he then, he was a freak. There's no other way to explain it. Because only a freak could recover from that injury that quickly to play in the Super Bowl, which he did.
Very true.
He caught 9 balls for 122 yards, but let's face it, he wasn't the player that he had been during the regular season, and that's not his fault. That's to be expected with the injury. So the question is, if you had Terrell Owens at 100%, does that make the difference, and do the Eagles win that game?
Is there a different head coach?
No, there's just a different Terrell Owens.
Is there a different starting quarterback?
No, just a different Terrell Owens.
They don't win the Super Bowl. Okay. Do you remember that game? I mean, I remember that. I'm not an Eagles fan, as everybody knows, okay? But I remember that game. I remember there being 2 minutes left on the clock. And I remember the Eagles not even being in the 2-minute offense. Okay? I don't know what Andy Reid was thinking. I realize now he's the greatest head coach in NFL history because he won a Super Bowl with Pat Mahomes and the best team in the NFL. He somehow won the Super Bowl with the best team. But he would not even go into the freaking 2-minute drill, okay, losing with 2 minutes to go in the game. On top of that, his starting quarterback's thrown up in the huddle. I think I heard
that's unconfirmed.
Didn't Terrell Owens recently say that McNabb had been drunk the night before and was hungover or something along those lines? Did you hear that?
I did not.
You may want to look that one up. I can't confirm or deny, but I think I read something like that. But the bottom line is, again, if we were putting this on a video game, okay, and the video game had to adjust for the injury to Terrell Owens, and if you put him back in there, it probably makes a difference. In the real world, Andy Reid is not winning a Super Bowl the way he coached that 2014. Even if they had Terrell Owens, they might have taken a lead, and he would have gone into the prevent defense in the first quarter with a 3-0 lead. He was just such a lousy head coach. I put that on him.
No, I'll tell you why that's wrong. Because they had a 14-7 lead at one point, and they didn't turtle up on defense. They didn't go into prevent mode.
I've watched Andy Reid with his prevent defense. Didn't that happen in that game when they blew a 20-some point lead over, was it the Colts? Because Andy Reid went into prevent in the second quarter.
No, that was the Titans. And that was a regular season game 3 years before that.
No. I mean, with the Chiefs. Didn't they blow like a 3 or 4 touchdown? I'm pretty confident they blew a 3 or 4 touchdown lead. But bottom line, and again, I detest Andy Reid. Everybody knows that. This is a guy who claims character is so important, yet there's not 1 ounce of character in his entire family. So that makes him a hypocrite in my eyes.
Hold on. 3 of his 5 kids have stayed out of trouble with the law.
So 40% of his kids have been in trouble. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
I hear you. I know. And obviously, I didn't know he had 3 other kids. I'm just telling you the truth. I only know about the 2 that were into drugs and guns, okay? And the one that almost killed a little girl or might have killed a little girl. I don't remember what it was. But again,
no, she's recovering as well as can be expected.
That's good to hear. But all I'm going to say to you is, if you're going to preach character to your team and you're going to cut players for lack of character, and then you give jobs to family members with no character, shame on you.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to respond to that stink bomb. I'm just going to say that had the Eagles had a healthy Terrell Owens in that Super Bowl, odds are they would not have been in that circumstance on that long fourth quarter drive where everyone in the world but Andy Reid wondered why they were not in a 2 or even a 4-minute offense.
It's all on Andy Reid. He lost that. Then again, every press conference for how many years? I should have done better. Personally, if I had a head coach that was responsible for every one of my losses, I would have fired him a long time ago. Since he took accountability for every single loss, at some point in time, it was time for him to go because he cost them a lot of games based on his own press conferences. You may have noticed, I'm not a fan.
I have noticed.
Indeed.
Well, I think that's all we got.
Okay.
Unless you want to go on.
Oh, I could go on for the next hour and a half, but I don't want to bore people with my rant about Andy Reid. Let me just say that even the blind squirrel finds a nut. That's how he won the Super Bowl, even with the best team in the NFL. And then you saw what he did this year, 2020. What a joke. I could have been on that offensive line and done the same job. Okay? But anyway, we don't need to go there. So, in the meantime, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time around. I'm SwamiLee.
I'm Mellow Mike.
And we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye-bye.